Hey everybody, it's Brandy Clark. We are here with another episode of You Can't Come Over, But You Can Come In with probably, as a songwriter, I would say probably my biggest influence, Gretchen
Oh,
Peters, here with her lovely husband, Barry Walsh, who also plays, I think is probably your right hand more than people even know. Last
yeah.
time I saw them in the flesh, we were on a plane. We both played shows in Minnesota the night before, and it was before all this craziness started.
That's right. Yeah, we thought we were going to be doing this all the rest of the year. Mhm. We were just glad to be going home for 2 days or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so were you in the middle of a tour when this hit?
I guess I'm always in the middle of a tour. I think I think we were going onward to New England, and then yeah, and then we had a bunch of touring after that. And after we did our last show was in Boston, I think on March 6th or 7th, and then we went home and we were done for what looks like most of the rest of the year, if not the whole year.
I know. Every week I'm hopeful that they're going to say yes, because I was supposed to start a tour March 28th that has been moved to into summer, first part of fall, but it's still kind of in pencil. And every week I'm hoping that they'll say, "Oh, we can put this in ink," and
Yeah,
we're in
yeah.
that whole wait and see.
It's amazing. I mean, I knew that we would miss it, but it's amazing in what ways we miss it. I mean, it's just I won't lie, staying home and just being in one place for a while has been really great. But boy, just the communal part of performing, just being with this people that are like-minded, that we're all gathered together in the same room and we're just in the music. And I just miss that a lot. And when we sit around the house here for a week and we don't play music, we really feel it. There's a lack.
I know, I've really realized it during this. I've always, I think all of us that are performers love an audience, but you, I always think I love the clapping, but
Yeah.
truthfully, the audience is half of what we do.
Oh yeah.
When we
Oh
do
yes.
live
Yeah.
streams, you feel even less connected than when you're in the studio making an album. I feel like, you just feel
Yeah.
isolated.
Although the comments help.
Yes, that's
The
true.
comments do help. I
That's
mean, because you see, I mean, I'm sure it's the same way for you. Um, we see people that have been coming to see us for literally 25 years in the comments, and it feels so good to know that those people are still with you. And it's definitely, I know it's a cliche, but it's definitely like a family.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel that too. And in the same way that you feel more disconnected than ever, that does make me feel more connected. Like
Yeah.
like you're talking about those people that you see at a lot of shows for a long time. I'm sure Andrew Newis is one of them. I know that
He's
I know he's a huge Gretchen Peters fan. I see him pop up in feeds and it makes my heart smile. To think
Oh,
that.
and that's the other thing about it that I love is that interconnectivity, that the little, the threads, the fingers that join together because someone listened to me, so then they listened to Matresa Berg, and then they found somebody else, and they found you, or vice versa. That whole part of it, because after all, I mean, that's how we grew up finding music. I think we found one thing and it led us to something else and it led us to something else. That was my whole journey when I was a kid. When I first played guitar, was going from one thing to the next with pretty much no map and no compass, just finding the things that I loved.
So what was the first thing you ever remember really loving music
Peter,
wise?
Paul, and Mary. I was 7 years old when I learned how to play the guitar, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, it was during the folk music, the biggest, peak of the folk music scare. And Peter, Paul, and Mary was, for a 7-year-old kid, it was accessible music. There were, they were easy guitar chords. Usually it was 3 chords. So, and I loved harmony. I really, really loved harmony. So they were perfect for that. I graduated pretty quickly to more grown-up stuff like Bob Dylan and Paul Simon but it was folk music. It was all of that. I was growing up in New York, and I was very aware that the folk scene was happening like literally 8 miles away from where I lived in New York City. And I had an older sister, and she would go to the folk clubs. So, I mean, I was very aware that it was there, and it was a mythical place to me, the same way that Nashville became a mythical place to me later. It was like, oh my God, that's where Bob Dylan plays, and that's where all these little folk clubs are, and where Tom Rush plays, and just all of the folk artists from the late 60s and early 70s.
Wow. Isn't that crazy too, how it moves around? Like you talk about it being 8 miles from where you were, and then it moved to at another point in your life, it was Nashville. I mean, I always think about, the time that it was like Laurel Canyon and all, it's just like musicians, I think, maybe don't even decide. There's a spiritual thing that moves musicians to.
There's like a cosmic magnet that happens. I mean, it's of some kind. Yeah. And Laurel Canyon, definitely. And Nashville for a long time. I mean, Nashville has, I guess partly because the business part of the music is there, but there's been an attraction and a group of like-minded people hanging out in Nashville since the 60s that came not just because the industry was there, but because other songwriters and other musicians, like going back to Mickey Newbury and Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt and those guys, Rodney Crowell, Steve Earle. And it's pretty much continued to today to be that sort of a magnet.
Yeah, I've never been anyplace else, and I feel lucky that I've worked in New York and LA and different places. I've never been any other place where songwriting is so sacred and so many people are, like you're saying, like-minded.
Yeah.
There is, I mean, I don't, and when I say it, I don't say it arrogantly. I just think the best songwriters in the world are in Nashville the most of them. I mean, there are great songwriters everywhere, but.
And I would also add to that the best studio musicians in the world in Nashville too.
Okay, I would say that's even more.
Yeah.
It's why when people make records in other towns, a lot of times they take Nashville musicians.
Yeah.
I agree. So
I mean, it's stunning, the concentration of talent. I always think, when I was I was on a plane the first time I was nominated for a Grammy, and I was on the plane back home from LA, and we hit some pretty serious turbulence. And I looked around on the plane and I thought, I'm not even going to make it into the first paragraph if this plane goes down.
I'm sure you know Dale Dodson.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, he's one of my favorite characters. And one of the funniest things he's ever said was he was on a plane. This is not that long ago. And they were going somewhere, and it was a music business sort of thing. Might have been Key West songwriters or something like that.
Yeah.
And he said that Thomas Rhett got on the plane, and he said, shit, now it's just going to be Thomas Rhett and other industry professionals.
That's it. That's right.
It was
the things that go through your mind.
Yes, he did say that. So speaking of influences and records, you have a record this week, The Night You Wrote the Songs of Mickey Newbury.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taping this, so all I'd have is the first song, The Night You Wrote That Song. And I've listened to it a lot. And it's such a stunning version. And I was thinking as I listened to that, did it feel like less pressure to make this record or more pressure than if it were your songs?
I think initially, well, the pressure all comes from inside. you know, it's all up here. It's all stuff that's self-imposed. And I will say, I really wanted to do this right because Mickey was such a huge influence on me, and because nobody needed to do any more Mickey Newbury covers. I mean, God knows there are hundreds. And besides that, his own versions of his own songs are definitive. They're beautiful. So it wasn't like anybody was saying somebody needs to make a record of, you know, Mickey Newbury songs. But I will say that, you know, once you go through that whole sort of head trip of, oh God, how do I do this? I really want to do this, but how do I do it? That stuff kind of falls away once you get in the studio, and it becomes the same process as the process when you make, you know, when I make a record of my own songs. It's really, really simple. It's who is this character in this song, and how do I get inside their mind and their body, and then how do I tell their story? And it just becomes that, and it's really not any more complicated than that. And I guess I probably wouldn't have been able to do this record unself-consciously if I had been younger and I hadn't made so many records. But at this point, I kind of know the ropes, and I kind of know that's really all you have to worry about. I mean, whenever I sort of psych myself out of anything performance-wise, I always go back to my mantra, which is just tell the story, just tell the story. And then that helps me if I'm having a problem singing it. It helps me if I'm feeling nervous about forgetting the words. It just helps me to remember to focus on the story. And so that's really all I really had to do with Mickey's songs, is just tell the stories.
Wow. Well, I'd love it if you played something from that record.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to. This
is your show. You play whatever you want. The rest of us just are lucky to listen in.
Well, Barry is going to play with me on this one. One of the things that I loved about Mickey Newbury is he had this incredible empathy for all the characters in his songs, even the bad guys. I mean, he kind of, like, they were real people. They weren't, there wasn't just the main character and then, you know, cardboard stand-ins, everybody. And this song to me really kind of exemplifies that. He's breaking up with this woman, and yet he's seeing it from her point of view, which just, I think, is just a beautiful thing, aside from it just being a beautiful song. Well, morning's come, and all my mind is aching. Sunshine standing quiet at my door. Just like the dawn, my heart is silent. With my tears goes tumbling to the floor. Once again, the whole town will be talking. Lord, I've seen the pity in their eyes. They could never understand. It's her sorrow, it's not helping. But no matter what they say, we know she tried. Baby's packed her soft things, and she's left me. I know she didn't mean to make me cry. It's not her heart, Lord, it's her mind. she even woke me up to say goodbye. It's not her heart, Lord, it's her. She didn't mean to bail. Why she even woke me up to say goodbye.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
We had a little rattle there.
We had our puppy Oliver just woke up in the middle of that. He even woke us up to say, "I'm hungry," or something. I don't know.
I
This is real life stuff, people.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
It's such a gorgeous song. Yeah.
Wow. When I was getting ready for this, I was right. You talk about one thing leading you to another. The place where I discovered you, I am such a sucker for. I've always been an album fan, and
Me too.
yeah, I mean, I think most songwriters are. But it was when you were old. It was Martina, and
Oh yeah.
and I started to see your name. That was a time in my life I discovered people like you, and then like on the production end of things, Tony Brown. I started to see
Yes.
his name on all these records I loved, and but your first record that I had The Secret of Life, which I loved. There was a record that you did. I think it was just self-titled, and
Oh my God, you're like one of the 5 people that had that record.
that record. It defines a certain summer of my life for me.
Wow.
For some reason I was living in Nashville, but I had my brother's truck. He lives in Alaska now, but at the time he worked in Alaska, and he left his truck with me. And that was the only CD in my player. And your song Souvenirs, really, I learned more about great lyric writing from that song than I think almost any song.
It's interesting that you picked that out, because I remember, and Barry even has a memory about that song. But I remember when I wrote it, I had been in Nashville for quite, over 10 years at that point. And people kept saying this thing to me, which felt very vague and frustrating, like, when you find your voice, or you'll find your voice, or you need to find your voice. And I didn't quite have a handle on what that meant, or where can I go to find it? What does that really mean? And when I wrote Souvenirs, there's something about the lyric of that I felt like that was just intrinsically me. I mean, something changed. I knew that I had found it, whatever that thing was, and whoever that voice in that song was really, really me. And I kind of zeroed in on that, and I think it was definitely a very clear mark of delineation in my songwriting approach after that, because I latched on to whatever it was that I had done there, and I went from there. It's funny about songwriting. It's a learning experience through your entire life. It just never ever ends. You never get where you're going, but that's kind of the wonderful thing about it. You just keep learning new things and aspiring to write more like you will in the future, I guess. I mean, there was a time when I was writing songs that were hits, that were really successful, when I knew I wasn't writing as deep or as hard as I could.
Wow.
Which I think surprises some people, but I think internally, you kind of maybe know where you're going before anybody else does, in your gut, and in your deepest self. And even during the time when I was writing songs that were successful, I had just this itch of dissatisfaction that, I think I can do better than that. I think I can write better than that. I also had friends that were writing unbelievably brilliant songs and weren't getting anywhere with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that opened my eyes too. I realized that it's not just about brilliance. There's a lot of other things that go into it. And I mean, one of my favorite songwriters who I considered just genius, who passed away earlier this year, was David Olney. And not very many people know who David Olney was, but in my opinion, anybody who knows about Guy Clark should know David Olney's name. So, it was things like that too. I felt like I'm getting a lot of recognition here, but I'm not probably doing the best work I can do. I still have that ahead of me. Or maybe I'm just type A. I don't know.
I think anybody who's really great at what they do, I think most like really great artists, whatever medium it is, always feels like it could be better. I mean, I've always heard, one of my favorite songs by the Eagles is New Kid in Town. And I've heard that song took years to write. And I don't know if that's true. It's just what I've heard. And that Don Henley's still not happy with it. And
we all know where the fault lines in our songs are. We know. I mean, where there are little places in your songs, I'm sure, like there are in mine, where I just go, God, I could have got, if I just waited longer for the right word or whatever. But there's the other thing, which I think it was attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, I'm not sure, which says that no work of art is ever completed, it's only abandoned. And at some point you write a song and you go back and you re-edit and then you realize that if you touch it anymore, you're just going to start doing damage. Mm-hmm. So it's at that point where you go, it's done. It's done. This is as good as it's going to be.
So in what you said, two things you said about you're always trying to get better. A guy that I had a really, good fortune of getting to write with some is Rory Burke. And anybody on here who doesn't know Rory, he's attached to many amazing songs, and he's also just an amazing person. And I remember he said to me, the only thing you have to be a songwriter is a lifelong learner. That's what you have to.
That's so true.
Yeah, what you just said.
So true.
That.
Yeah.
So how much of it, you talk about you were starting to have success and you knew people who you felt like were writing as good of songs, or in your opinion, maybe even better, and weren't getting any traction. How much of any of it do you think is luck?
Well, I think that's changed a little bit, honestly. I mean, I did believe back then, like, let's say in the 90s when I was having most of my commercial success, I was firmly of the belief, and I still am, that back then, at that moment, if you wrote a great song, it would find its way out. Not a good one, but a great one. Mm-hmm. And they don't come along that often, as we all know. But I'm not even totally sure that's true anymore. Or at least, I mean, it may find its way out into the world, but it's not necessarily going to find its way onto the radio, which is, in the 90s, I didn't realize what a golden era that was for great songs and for great singers. We had, I had Martina McBride and Patti Loveless and Trisha Yearwood and Faith Hill and, Pam Tillis, all these amazing female artists who were asking me for songs. And I didn't realize and they were getting on the radio. I mean, they were being played. So you really had a chance at writing. Like in my case, I wrote some fairly quirky songs. They weren't straight ahead, obvious, maybe hits, but they would get on a Faith Hill record or a Martina McBride record. Those were artists that wanted those songs. And because they were women, they were willing to take a bit more of a chance because, it was hard to be a female artist then. It's harder now, I think, but it was even hard then. They were still up against more. So they were risk takers, all of them. So I think that was an element of luck for sure. And I also, I mean, I honestly believe, anybody that says they have it figured out how you can have commercial success is lying through their teeth, because I don't know how that all works. I did figure one thing out pretty early, and that was when I first moved to town. I tried so hard to write what I heard on the radio. And the Judds were a really big thing at the time, and I loved two-part harmony, and I wrote so many wannabe Judds songs, and nobody cared. I mean, nobody cared at all. And when I started writing what I wanted to write, people started listening, and ultimately they started recording those songs. And it was a really important lesson for me to leave the prognostication about what's a hit and what's commercial, and just leave that alone. That's not my job. It's someone else's job. And once I started writing songs that I cared about and that really felt like they needed to come out, everything happened for me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of amazing, but that's how it worked.
Yeah, I think that's how it works for everybody. I mean,
I think so.
Really, when people quit, it's so hard to not fight your own instincts.
Right.
Like we were just talking about before I hit record on this. Like, this is a small thing, but the episode with Mary Chapin Carpenter, there's a lot of talking, and I loved that. And I underestimate the people who tune in, because I think, oh, they're going to hate this. They're going to yell at me via scream. That yelling almost hurts worse. And what I've found is, oh wow, they really like that the same way I do. And speaking of the Judds, Brent Mayer is somebody that I've also had the pleasure of getting to know a little bit. And he told me, I asked him one time how he chose who he worked with. And he said, I just figured if I liked something, 2 million other people would.
That's it. That's exactly it. And like I said to you, it's so hard to realize and really get that you're the first member of your own audience. If you're really writing for yourself, there are so many other people out there that are like you, that love what you love and will respond to what you respond to. But it's hard to get that, because we doubt ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we think we can outsmart ourselves. And instinct, I teach songwriting workshops, and I tell my students over and over again, your instinct is basically all you've got. So you better hone it, and you better listen to it, and you better get really, really good at listening to that voice, because sometimes it's going to tell you crazy things. Like, to write this crazy line in a song, and your conscious brain is going to say, oh, I can't say that, or that won't get on the radio, or whatever. And you better be listening to your instinct, because those are the things that make songs individual and wonderful and magic, and make them stand out.
So I think that's such great advice. There's so many things about this I'm gonna rewind and listen to. That's a good one. How did you, most of, like, you have more self-written songs than anybody I know. And by that, anybody that's listening, that means she wrote the whole thing by herself. Than any other person, artist, songwriter I see. There's rarely another name next to yours. When did you figure that part out, that you were better by yourself than maybe with others?
Early. And it was because I had an incredible publisher. My first publisher was Noel Fox. He ran the little publishing company owned by the Oak Ridge Boys called Silverline Gold Line. And I had just come to Nashville, and everyone said, co-write, you got to co-write. So I dutifully went out and tried to co-write, and I had a couple really nearly traumatic experiences doing it, because I didn't understand how it was supposed to work. And my approach to writing, when I have an idea, it almost feels like a pre-verbal mass that's in my chest. It's not like something I could sit down and, with somebody across from me and say, hey, I got this idea, because I can't even verbalize it at that point. and yet it's something, it's a feeling I can't ignore, and I sit with it until ultimately it becomes a song. So that process alone doesn't really lend itself to co-writing. It's not like I get amazing melodies that just drop into my head, or I get here's a title and a first verse. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times it's just this sort of amorphous mass. So anyway, I tried the co-writing thing, and I was writing songs that were not as good as the ones I was writing by myself. And my publisher saw that, even though I had had no success at that point. He saw that, and he just took me aside one day and he said, you know what? Just write by yourself. It's fine. You don't have to do this. I can see that you're miserable and you don't like it and you're uncomfortable. And oh my God, if he hadn't been there, I don't know, that was really important for me to be just given the permission to do it, because it was not at all the standard thing in Nashville at the time. Since then, I got to know a couple of writers, Tony Arata and Hugh Prestwood. Both of them wrote alone a lot, and we would joke about it. And one time I was at some kind of a songwriters event, and I got into an elevator with like 20 other songwriters, and Mark D. Sanders, who was a very successful writer at the time, he said, we got her in an elevator, let's make her co-write.
I can hear you saying that. Mark was, he and I were signed to the same publishing company at the same time. So you could have told me that story and not told me who that was, and I would have guessed.
You would have known. But I just was, with a few exceptions, I was never comfortable with it. I have to really, I have to have such a high trust and intimacy level with a person to write with them, because for me, it's just basically the process is like, okay, I'm going to sit on my bed and play something till I cry, and then I think I'll have something, and you can't just do that in an office, or at least I can't.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's a reason, your songs, I think that, I try to do both. I used to write more by myself than I do now, and I need to do that more. It's hard when you get spoiled by co-writing, because it's quicker a lot of times.
Yes, it is quicker for sure.
But there's something about songs, and I believe this about your songs, that people will be talking about them and singing them 100 years from now. And there is something about one brush painting that picture that I think does that, because in some ways it makes it a little less accessible to the masses at times. Now, your songs have definitely been loved and accepted by the masses, but it's because there's no compromise in it. And
yeah, I think that's true. There's a bit more mystery because you're talking about something that's coming from one mind. I think about, when you say that, it makes me think about Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell and Mickey Newbury, who wrote alone a lot. And those songs are not what you would really at first glance look at and say that's a universal idea. They're very specific in a way. So I think that is true. I can almost tell the songs that were written solo. And that's not to slag off on co-writing, because it can be so wonderful. I mean, one of the people that recently that I've written a lot with is Ben Glover, and I don't know what it is about Ben, but Ben and I have just a thing where I do know what it is actually. He is okay with me, with both of us sitting in a room and not talking for a really long time. And that's such a hard thing to do with someone else. Yeah. But we have a really high comfort level with that. And that helps me kind of both be alone and be with him at the same time in the same room. And that's, co-writing can be amazing. It's just, to me, it's just it's like playing doubles tennis or singles, it's a different thing.
I love Ben. I love that you guys have that. And the songs that you guys have written that I know are stunning.
And those songs that I wrote with Ben would not have come to be had he not been. That's when you're doing it right, is when you come up with something that you wouldn't have come up with in a million years. That's when it's really co-writing is great.
Speaking of co-writers, one of my favorite co-writers is Jessie Jo Dillon, and her and I were at her house not long ago, a couple months ago, and we were a little bit dejected, kind of by what you were talking about, how the best song doesn't always win, and is there a place for amazing songs? And I said, Jesse, I'll play you a song that makes me think there is. And it was your song, 5 Minutes. And
Oh,
Jesse sat there and cried, as did I. But that's such, I mean, so many of your songs are so great, but every once in a while, one raises its hand in my heart. And I don't even know why. But there's something about the character in that song that really gets me. Is that somebody you know? Is it somebody you conjured up?
she's I think she's actually a composite of so many people in my life, like every waitress that worked at every club that I played at when I was in my 20s, that was probably only 5 or 6 years older than me, but seemed like my mom at the time because I was so young. And it's all of those women, and women that I've known, people's moms that I've known. I will tell you, there's a song by James McMurtry called Ruby and Carlos, and that song just put a fire under me. The character of Ruby, I've told him this. I played a festival with him, and I had the chance to tell him this. The character of Ruby stuck in my mind the way the character in John Prine's Angel from Montgomery did. And I feel like the woman in 5 Minutes, I can trace the DNA of pretty much all my female characters kind of back to those two songs, especially Angel from Montgomery. But there is a certain middle-aged woman that I've been writing about, and from her perspective since I was in my 20s, before I was even old enough to know, there was just something about her. And that woman in 5 Minutes is one of my favorite characters. But to me, she's just really kind of another iteration of the same character I've been writing over and over and over again. I just find her story and women who are in her position, and sort of, they're stoic, and they're incredibly strong, but not in a flashy way, not in a way, and they're also honest. She's really honest. She has a lot of regrets, and she doesn't sugarcoat it. There's no heroic, I don't regret anything. No, she's not in a good place, but she's honest about it. And I just think I find those characters so compelling. Should we play that one? I'd love to play that one.
I would love it if you would.
All right. And we've certainly talked about it enough.
Yeah.
You want to play one? Let's see. All right. The funny thing is, this song was on my album Hello Cruel World, and I wasn't going to put it on the record because I had this idea that didn't fit with the rest of the songs. And I was on tour in the UK with Susie Boggess and Matraisa Berg. We were doing our Wine, Women, and Song thing, and I just threw it in. I just decided to start playing it, and the response to it was so overwhelming that I thought, well, I must be wrong about this. So I ended up putting it on the record, and of course, it's probably one of the most, maybe the most requested, maybe just after On a Bus to St. Cloud songs that we do. So,
well, and I'll say this, like many things that I've been turned on to, before that album came out, Robert Philhart, who was an ASCAP at the
bless
time.
him.
I mean, I always tell people, Robert has done more for me than almost anybody. Like, he is like a manager for anybody he loves. And
He is.
He called,
and a fairy godmother too.
Yes, he's so wonderful.
He took me out to dinner with Katie Oslin, which just blew my mind because I love her so much, and he just makes things happen. He really is like a fairy godmother. So.
He is, and he called me, and you had done some sort of it was like an album pre-release, I think, maybe it was ASCAP, But whatever it was, the album wasn't out, and he was like, Brandy, this song by Gretchen, like 5 minutes, just, wait till you hear this. And
Oh, bless him.
yeah, so
Love him.
I'll let you play this.
Okay. I've got 5 minutes to sneak a cigarette. 5 minutes to myself. Back behind the screen door, Brandy's lunching, and I ain't got time to worry about my health. My boss says I smoke myself to death. Andy, he reminds me some. Back when you were Romeo, I was Juliet. West Texas Capulet, Montague. I don't think too much about you anymore. We weren't much more than kids. It was nearly 20 years ago I shut and locked that door. Now I've got 5 minutes, not much time. Most nights I come home from work and I pour a glass of wine. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 before I stop. And Jessie makes a sandwich if I sleep through the summertime. And she leaves me on the couch to sleep it off. Jessie just turned 17. She's wild as she. There ain't nothing I can do. Last weekend she ran off to meet a boy in Tennessee, just like I used to run to. I gave her hell when she came home this afternoon. Mascara running down her face. Seems like history repeats itself, and it ain't up to you. And in 5 minutes, your whole life can change. Andy, he's good to me, and I can see it in his eyes. He'd love to take your place. Something deep inside me just withers up and dies to make love to him and only see your face. Somehow I've let myself go gently down the street. A fine example between the working and the ghosts that haunt my dreams. I've got 5 minutes,
Absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
Yeah. Whew.
And it came in at exactly 5 minutes on when the mastering guy mastered that record. He said, I think I can make this.
He called us up and he said, you're not going to believe this, but it comes in at 5 minutes. I might have to shave a 1/10 of a second, and I said, do it. Because it's just too perfect.
It's amazing. Oh, do you have a favorite song you've written, or is it too hard to choose?
I certainly have maybe like a top 5. I kind of feel like, I think like that one's heart wise may be my favorite, but in terms of like how well written, I really feel like the Matador is
That's a great one.
If it's not at the top of my list on any given day, it's close. I mean, I just felt like when I wrote that song, I just felt like I don't think that there's anything else I can do to this to make it better. I just think, and you just, that's so rare. I mean, like I said, we know where the fault lines are with our songs, but that song, writing the Matador, it possessed me. It was not like, normally my process would be, especially when I was writing for an album, which would be, I would have 10 or 20 songs in various states of doneness. Mm-hmm. And I would head down here to Northwest Florida all by myself in the car to finish them up. And a lot of times I would come away with, after a week, say, of working on them, I would come away with half an album. So that was my intent on that particular writing trip. And I came down and I got the idea for the Matador in the car on the way down, and it just would not leave me alone. And I spent 5 days basically not doing anything else but working on it. Got done with it, and I sent it a little song file in an email to Barry, and I said, this is all I've done all week. And I just thought, oh God, if this isn't good, I've just wasted a whole week and a lot of gas money, and I didn't hear back, and I was like, why aren't you emailing me back? And turns out he was at the gym, and he emailed me back finally, and he said, I think that might be the best song you've ever written. And I just thought, oh, praise God, because it's the only one I've written this week. So, but it just took a hold of me, that one. And, I think you have to listen to that voice. As my friend Eliza Gilkison said, if you don't listen to that voice, it's going to fly away and go to Bob Dylan's house. So you better pay attention.
Well, I think there's nothing better, like when you talk about getting that idea in the car and spending that whole week on that song, that is such an amazing feeling to be.
Oh, it is.
Like my favorite part of writing a song, other than when it's finished, is, and when you feel like, okay, there's nothing more I can do to this, is when you just can't wait to get up and work on it, or you can't go to sleep because you're so consumed with it. And that's such an
and when the ideas are just coming and coming, and a lot of times for me, I try to do something, and I tell my writing students this, I try to intersperse writing time with doing something physical, like taking a walk, because I feel like that sort of shakes up your brain a little bit. And sometimes if you're in a stuck place, going for a 10-minute walk or a half an hour walk will really make lines they'll come out. You'll think of the answers to the problems that you're working. And sometimes, I've had that experience so many times where I'll put down a song that I'm working on, that I'm really into working on, but I may be kind of stuck on a line or something. And I'll go for a walk, and things will start coming to my brain so fast. I'm talking into my phone and walking, just trying not to forget all the ideas that are coming. That is a great feeling, because it's the opposite of nothing coming, which is, we deal with that a lot. There's a lot of frustrating sitting in a room going, why is nothing happening? And along with that comes the feeling of, I knew that I wasn't really a songwriter, and this is where people are going to find out. This is like, I don't have anything else to write about. I'll never write a song again. I can't tell you how many times I've had that feeling. And it's never true, but
makes me feel better. I've kept you for a long time, and I'd love it if you guys played one more song. But I wanted to share with you. I was thinking this morning. I'm trying not to get emotional when I talk about this, but of your songs and how much I've learned from them and what they have meant to me. And I think I was trying to think of what's my favorite line in a Gretchen Peters song, and I have two, and it shocks me because they're so simple, but they're so true. Your song, "If Heaven," if the line, "and everyone I love is still alive." I think we've
And the older I get, the more that line hurts. Yeah, of course.
I cry to think about it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And then in "When You Love Someone," I think there's never been a truer line in any song than "Your lonely nights have just begun when you love someone."
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, let's play that one.
oh, I would love that.
Oh, let's play that one. Barry and I I wrote that with Brian Adams, and Brian, it was, as you know, it was the end title song for the movie Hope Floats. So Brian had the movie version. But when Brian and I wrote that in this little room off of a studio in Vancouver, it sounded more like an Everly Brothers song than anything. It was just a simple folk song when we wrote it. So when I recorded it, I asked Brian to re-record it with me as a duet, just that way, just the way it sounded when we were writing it. So now I sing it with my favorite duet partner, Barry. You ready?
Yeah.
Do we remember this?
Yeah. You start.
When you love someone, you'll do everything. You'll do all the crazy things that you can't explain. You'll shoot the moon, put out the sun. When you love someone, you'll deny the truth, believe a lie. There'll be times when you believe that you can really fly, but your lonely nights have just begun. When you love someone, when you love someone, you feel it deep inside, and nothing else ever change your mind. When you want someone, when you need someone, when you love when you love someone, you'll sacrifice, give everything you got, and you won't think twice. You risk it all, no matter what may come. When you love someone, yeah, you should put out the sun. When you love someone.
Whew. That was gorgeous. That was really great. Oh,
So glad I managed to write at least one love song in my life.
you know what's so great about it is it's a true love song, and I think that's probably
That's what's so hard about love songs, right? I mean,
I mean,
Make it real.
yeah, I mean, that one really, when your lonely nights have just begun, when you love someone, I think, whew, that's so, it takes it beyond. I've always wanted to write great love songs, and I don't. And they're,
Oh, you do too. You do. Your last album is full of them.
but they're kind of love gone wrong songs. It's like,
Well, that's my favorite kind, you
me
know.
too. That song to me, that when you love someone, it's so great because it doesn't just stay in the froth. You know, it really gets
Right.
in the real. So, anyways, I've kept you guys so long, and I appreciate you doing this. And everybody out there, go get The Night You Wrote That Song, the Songs of Mickey Newbury by Gretchen Peters. And while you're there, get all the other albums because you will be disappointed. Everybody that tunes into this loves a sad song. And I think
Oh, I got lots of those, that's for sure.
I saw a tweet from Barry. I think he called you the mistress of melancholy.
That was actually someone in a review called me that once, and it stuck. And then he decided to add the Duchess of Doom along with it.
This group of people listening, they love melancholy and they love doom. So you guys will not be disappointed.
Well, I love them then. We're of the same tribe for sure.
Anything you see on the iTunes Gretchen Peters page, there's not a bad record and there's not a bad song. And if you love songs and great singers and just great artistry, get this music.
Oh, thank you, Brandy.
Thank you for everything.
This has been so much fun.
Yes, it has. I will let you guys get back to your dog, and I'll get to mine. They've been barking out there. I've muted this at times so they wouldn't.
Mom, come on, Mom, it's time to eat.
Yes. So thank you guys so much, and enjoy this quarantine as much as you can.
We're doing it. Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Thanks.
We'll see you in real life soon, I hope.
See you.
Okay. Bye.